was supposed to go into effect July 1, and they pushed it back to September 1. RCTC is asking them to push it back to 2021 in the minimum because we don't know how this is all going to work, and actually it's going to have very negative impact on roads in trying to improve traffic flows and everything in Riverside County. So I will let you know how that one goes, and maybe we can also write a letter on that. The other, not really anything on here, but last Saturday I was able to join Pastor Brian Hawkins and his group of pastors and people for walk and pray on Florida Avenue, and it went extremely well. It was just good. He is also planning another walk and pray for this Saturday, and I forget the times, but it's going to start at, he calls it Farmers Market, and it's like, no, it's Farmers Corner. There's a difference. So it's on San Jacinto and Menlo at Farmers Corner. And there'll be all sorts of things going on there. But I think it's a good, I'm not sure, I think it's at 9 o'clock, from like 9 to noon. I think it's a very good way of going forth and uniting. I was going to say, when you're praying, when you're walking, you really have to pay attention so you don't fall. Sorry. But at the same time, I would say that also appreciated Hemet PD's presence in the community and doing their job, but just going by and supporting the people who were participating in a peaceful prayer walk, and all for that. And that's it. I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay. Like so many of my colleagues, a lot of meetings have been taking place by Zoom, and the Western Community Energy Board has a meeting scheduled, a Zoom meeting scheduled for tomorrow, so I can report on that next meeting. I've also been participating in a couple of other Zoom meetings that are not necessarily listed here. They've kind of grown out of the COVID situation. Supervisor Washington has initiated what he calls his District 3 Economic Task Force. City manager and I participate. We kind of share participation in that. There's been a lot of really good discussions and idea sharing. And as we all know, because of the dynamics of this impacting our entire nation, certainly sharing information here locally and regionally is very beneficial. A lot of good suggestions coming forth about encouraging businesses as we move deeper into the phases that the governor has authorized us to move into, that businesses are prepared with a business plan that meets all of the criteria so that when they get the green light to open, they can hit the ground running and actually start realizing some revenue income and a restoration of their business. I've also been participating in what we call a mayor's Zoom meeting, and there's a lot of good sharing of information. One of the things that arose in that mayor's discussion was the fact that there was an increase in COVID positive patients occurring in Imperial County, and that patients were being relocated from Imperial County to Riverside County because the hospitals in Imperial County didn't have the capacity. So one of the questions that came up out of that was, any of those patients coming in for treatment in Riverside County hospitals, are they going to be counted as Riverside County patients or Imperial County? And we were all assured that it's their resident of record of address is how they're tracked. So if they came from Imperial County, they're tracked statistically as a COVID positive patient from not from Riverside County, but from Imperial County. So my understanding is that a couple of them made it to our Hemet Hospital. I think that they may have already been treated and returned back to Imperial County. So that's the kind of sharing of information and clarification that happens when people are talking with each other, and the mayors providing information to the other mayors. We probably wouldn't have known about that, but a lot of the cities impacted in Coachella Valley shared that with us. So I think that's about all that I want to share now on this. So we'll move on to Ad Hoc Committee, Florida, SR 74 Ad Hoc Committee. Anything? Okay. And the Council Protocol Ad Hoc Committee, we've met once. We need to meet again and continue on with our work. Are there any City Council members that have requests for future agenda items? I just jumped right over him. That's because it's right at the bottom of the page here, and I was ready to turn the page. City Manager. Didn't mean to.
Councilmember Wright, thank you for pointing that out. Mayor, I don't have any updates for tonight.
Okay. See, I knew that intuitively.
Needs the consideration.
I do have one item that I would like to add for a future agenda item, and that is to bring back to council discussion to bring back the funding of the fire apparatus purchase and the radio system expense, and for consideration of utilizing an interfund loan to help preserve Measure U funds. So I'd like to make a motion that we add that item to future agenda. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes, that item passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And with that, there's no further. Sooner than
So
later.
we'll bring that back at the next council meeting so that the council has that. But with that, Mayor, too, number 11, the council did approve that in the consent calendar today.
Yes.
So if we could have the council remove that one, that would be appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, like EPA, yeah. Vapor
Okay.
intrusions. Yep.
Need a motion on that?
If we approve it, do we need a motion to take it off?
We already did it.
It's already been done, so it should get off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And I have one more item to bring back also, and I can pass these out to you guys. But we took $900,000 out of the Measure U account to pay for the fire department overtime. And April 28th, we got the March 31st expenditure report, and the fire department has only spent 64.92% of the 75%. So indeed, they will have $1,247,000 left over in their budget. And I feel that we need to change that line item because it wasn't necessarily presented. But I don't know why we would have taken the overtime out of Measure U if they didn't spend all of their money. Here, just take one down and pass it around. But anyways, I would like that to bring that back for discussion also on a future agenda item.
So what we can do is earlier today I did provide an accounting of all the Measure U expenses, and I believe based on the most updated spreadsheet that the council received today, there's about $200,000 left of that $900,000 that was allocated earlier this year. So we can certainly spend some time at the next council meeting and go line by line over those expenditures so that the council can.
I don't think that it needs to be a line by line. I mean, we can do whatever you think, but I don't need to look line by line. I think that if there's fund balances left over that are not spent, it needs to cover that overtime instead of taking it from Measure U. And we didn't have this third quarter report at the time that we made the decision, but this is very clear that there's funds left. So I think that your departments need to, your fire department can figure that out.
So we can bring back a discussion.
If it's 200 less, then that's even better.
Correct.
I think that we need to rediscuss that and maybe reallocate where that expense is coming from.
So that also goes into some of the actions that we've taken as a result of the reduction in revenues, including having Medic 5 at Station 5. So you will see some savings there. We can certainly go over what those dollar amounts are, so that the council can understand what some of those changes are and what we project those dollar amounts to be by the end of the year.
Right. I want to discuss reallocating this. So that's my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Meyer to discuss the reallocation of Measure U funds.
Yeah, the $900,000 fire overtime
Okay.
from Measure U funds back to fund balances in the fire department.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Criswell, Councilmember Wright,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa, Mayor Brown.
Yes, that passes unanimously. Okay, if there's no additional future agenda items, we'll move on to adjournment of our regular council meeting. And the next council meeting is scheduled for June 28th. And with that, we will adjourn. And do you want a quick recess before? Yeah, let's take 5, and we'll go back and resume our study session. June 23rd? I think I said 23rd.
Social media, you're saying they're just saying they're becoming a publication. They're trying to expand it. They want to expand it. Well, yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And of course everybody thinks that we're trying to do that too. Yeah.
Gets mixed up in everybody's mind about what we're doing and what we're not doing and why it's this and why it's that. I want to fix the hospital, I want to fix the schools.
I think they're sharing, everybody's sharing international.
Oh, sure. Well, and there was a whole group of people that had that common message that they wanted to make sure you got it. And the question is, electronics, that's so much easier. I just sit down and copy your Facebook post from somebody else.
Share.
You share your Facebook post. You, I don't. 41 comments. Holy cow. Crazy. I'm sure it'll be interesting. How many people are watching it?
Well, I tried with Suzanne, and she was watching it, and like it came on all of a sudden out of nowhere, and then off, and went on again.
And maybe bandwidth too as well. I mean, if you wind up with too many people, you know, you crash.
So at least we don't have the ladder.
We just signed our 45.
Oh, did they? I didn't see it. The camera's on the ladder. Don't hit the ladder. You knock the ladder, the camera falls off.
Are they about to use in the nuts?
Yeah, I bet there's a whole, bandwidth issue with that kind of thing. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, the model's still going to have to.
I know, of course. Yeah,
You're always replacing.
Because that, it's the reality. I mean, if there's anything I remember, is some of the great discussions we had with the liaison and some of the stuff. No, I mean,
you're the pro.
No, but I learned, that's the problem with our industry. We don't listen to
See the same thing, people saying the same thing, and they sort of like, it's reinforcement of that.
I took your comment to me about the overtime I briefly used.
I did that for them. I
said, I want to make it very clear with you, David. Make it very clear to me by the time you not have someone else and make a request.
That's why I wanted to make sure it was there.
He did it best, otherwise he didn't.
Oh, I got it. No problem. We're going to Vegas next week. My kids, grandkids are there.
Oh,
yeah. So we're going to go spend a couple of days with grandkids and do stuff like that. So my mom, she's 90. She's over in the desert. Great health. And so she's going to go up with us as well. Because we're going to see the grandkids, that kind of stuff. Yeah, all these people do RVing, now, as opposed to flying in an airplane. Let's go grab an RV.
They make movies about that.
You're never gonna find a parking space for an RV if you're in an RV. They're all
6 feet away, you stay there.
Exactly.
You there?
That's because.
We go this way. I just wanted to tell you thank you for something.
Yes,
that you
ma'am.
probably don't know that you did.
Sorry, no. I don't.
The Gosh Auto Group
Yeah.
in Temecula
Yeah.
offered scholarships to high school seniors.
$50,000.
My grandson got $1,000.
I really did it. Okay, that's
Jacob
insane.
Schmidt.
Oh my heavens. It was so obviously crazy, and so they wanted to do something. Of course, my comment was, well, what are we going to do in heaven? That kind of thing. And my brother looks at me like,
Do whatever you want. I'm going to do this in Temecula.
But yeah, well, good.
Yeah, it was so cool. I went down and he's been
they do a Facebook post or anything like that, or a video? They want to do a video.
Yeah.
They want to do videos or something like that.
So, yeah, he did, and I went, Eric, I don't know, I sent him this video,
Yeah. So,
and I said, well, that's even better, because nobody knows that you're my
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I know we did that. You know, the school district approaches a few years ago, like giving away a car. You know, based on attendance and stuff like that. And that wound up just being, you know, kind of unrealistic and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. And of course, it was the whole thing just kind of fall apart with this whole school thing. Well, obviously.
But, you know, we had a graduation party Friday night for him at my daughter's, well, Jackie teaches at Chaparral.
Okay.
And all three of the kids go there, and the twins
Chaparral, yeah, okay.
twins graduate next year. But they did, I mean, the video came out great, and even when I saw him walk across the stage, I mean, I was in the football stands.
Oh, really?
We
Yeah.
watched everybody, and then we got to go down on the field and take pictures, and it was great. It was weird. We had that one day, but it was okay.
Yeah.
And he got Puma Pride Award.
Oh, cool.
So that's whatever kid in the school and all of that extra stuff, plus all of these other things. He takes after his mom and dad. He's smart.
It's so tough to, you know, golly, they work so hard, especially the kids that do well. It's like, you know,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
get to do anything.
As we said, we preferred this kind of a party because we sat at the house and we all had cocktails and snackies, and we said it's better than sitting for 2 hours on a football.
Oh, yeah. This is a more, yeah. Him and I didn't do a good job.
I know, I saw.
Right in the parking lot. He could have driven around the track and done something, but they had some chintzy little thing there. They really didn't do it very
Yeah.
well. I didn't know until afterwards.
And that's just it. They could have gone down on the field first. They
It'd take a
had
lot.
flowers, they had plants, they had everything out there. And I'm like, this is okay.
The backdrop is there. You can have to go around there. They did a good job down there.
Yeah, and he was just jazzed about the fact that he got the scholarship. So thank you. That was
We accrued for it all year, so we already accrued the money after the.
good job. Well, next year I got 2 of them graduating. So that's good. You have 2 next year?
Oh.
Oh, yeah. The twins graduate, and it's like, ooh.
I didn't know you did scholarships.
I just no. Yeah, no, it's Temecula. Well, if you were forced to go to Temecula, Temecula.
Oh, yeah. My daughter goes to Chaparral too.
Okay, so
My older daughter was her daughter's student.
oh, okay, cool.
But my older daughter starts law school on Monday.
Oh,
And then we have
where at?
Southwestern in Los Angeles.
Sure.
And then we have 1 year, and then our younger one starts in college.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your indulgence. We needed a little bit of a break, so I will reconvene our study session, item 9A, on the preliminary budget work study. And I believe we left off, you were just about to go into general fund expenditures.
So thank you, Mayor. Just to recap, the previous slides that we talked about, I went over the reduction methodology for the city. A total of 58.1 FTE positions have been identified for elimination in the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. The bulk of these positions are in vacant positions, or the bulk of those reductions are in vacant positions. We've reprioritized the Measure U program in order to ensure that we don't, or that we minimize the number of workforce reductions in public safety. And so we reprioritize them in lieu of having new programs or new services or new personnel. We really prioritize funding the existing personnel in those departments. Proposed layoffs in the fire department total 5, while none are proposed in the fire department or the police department. I should note that as a result of the action that the council took about an hour ago with respect to the HFA side letter, that will change that number. So we will need to make adjustments and amendments based on those figures to update that figure. If the council chooses not to utilize the recommendations to fund public safety personnel from Measure U to make up for the difference in general fund revenues, then those individuals, those are additional reductions that will need to be made, workforce reductions that will need to be factored out moving forward if the council chooses not to. So the proposed general fund 2020-2021 expenditures, we've excluded Measure U for this discussion. I should note that the items that are before you on this slide include the items that are included in the 2020-2021 budget. Those include a 10% reduction across departments. That includes a 6% increase for public safety that we will again need to refine the numbers and remove the HFA increase. So the 6% increase is only for the HEMT POA and HPMA. We have factored in increased costs for retiree health, increased costs for PERS, increases for contracts for software maintenance that have escalators built into those contracts, increases in contract costs for Simpson Center, and we can talk about what we've factored in there. We obviously know that it may not be open as soon as possible, so we've allocated a lower amount for that operation, knowing that it will probably take some time before it's fully open. We have proposed a consolidation of the Public Works Department and the Engineering Department. We've proposed the creation of the Administrative Services Department, resulting in a number of reductions. Included comp time for the Police Department. We've also included funding for public safety in the general fund as a result of utilizing Measure U. We've also included a 20% emergency reserve that the city will still adhere to. We've included enhanced levels of customer service in the water utility as a result of COVID-19 shutoffs. We imagine that we're going to have a number of payment plans that some of our residents will like. We've got new state laws that have gone into effect. So those additions have been added to the budget, but they have no general fund impact. We've converted to the JPIA, and workers' compensation costs have been updated. So as you can recall, at the previous council meeting, the council decided to go with a program that lessened the premium on the front side, which resulted in a lowered total cost, hopefully. And so we've programmed in dollars for the trust fund that we were required to have. That change resulted in a reduction of about a few $100,000, $400,000 or so, that we were able to free up and allocate to the different operations within the city of Hemet. We've included also changes to the Public Works Department in terms of how it's organized and how it's functioning. And then we've also included 2020 election costs within the budget as well. So what is not included in this year's budget, we don't have cost of living adjustments for non-safety personnel. We have not included a classification or compensation study for non-safety personnel. This telephone system was on the previous budget. It was not included. It was not included in this year's budget. It hasn't been included for the upcoming budget. We have not included any private security costs for the library or City Hall. We have not included any consolidated grant management programming in this budget, but we do have an opportunity that Councilmember Wright and I have talked about with respect to an opportunity that we have moving forward. We have not included proactive mobile home inspection staff. We have not included an economic development program, and we have removed the special events grant allocations that has been programmed in for previous years. We've removed that in this year's budget given our financial constraints. So as you can see, the departments and the divisions have been allocated on this sheet. This sheet is included in the staff report. A lot of the content that I've included in this budget presentation is pulled straight from the staff report. And so you'll notice that the total proposed expenditures is $38.7 million. Based on the proposed projected revenues that we have for this upcoming fiscal year, we project a $405 surplus for fiscal year 2020-2021. Based on the projected ending fund balance of 6/30/2020, the projected fund balance is approximately $8.4 million, leaving us with a proposed reserve amount of 21.66%. So I should caution that because our expenditures are so low compared to previous years, our reserve requirement is lower because of that. So had we rolled over our current year expenditures, we would have been unable to meet our reserves. So the only reason we're able to meet our reserve is because our proposed expenditures are so much lower than what they are in the current year. So now we'll get into the departmental review and really take a look into what we proposed in the upcoming budget. So with respect to the City Council office, the City Clerk's office, and the City Manager's office, in the City Manager's office, we have eliminated the Assistant City Manager position. We've replaced that with an Assistant to the City Manager. That is a lower costing position that can still provide some much needed help for the City Manager's office, but obviously at a reduced cost. We've also eliminated the conference budget in the City Manager's office. In the Clerk's office, the City Clerk has eliminated half of a full-time equivalent. We developed a concept where we would be able to share staff. So the Finance Department would utilize, in addition to the reductions that they made a half FTE reduction. And so we would be sharing staff between the Clerk's office and the Finance Department to make sure that the Clerk's office has the help that is needed, but then also accommodate the reduction that was requested. In the City Council office, we have made some reductions in the training and education budget, and we've eliminated the computer purchases. Those items were one-time purchases for the current fiscal year, and we don't anticipate needing them for the 2020 or 2021 fiscal year. So with the restructuring or the creation of the Administrative Services Department, it will result in the consolidation of the Human Resources Division, IT Division, and the Finance Department. This will result in the elimination of the HR Manager, the elimination of the GIS Specialist, the elimination of an accountant position, the elimination of the Office Specialist position, or half of the FTE, which I mentioned will be shared with the Clerk's office. Training and conference budgets were reduced. And in addition to that, IT reduced its software contracts, materials, and supplies in its respective budget. Part of the driving force of this item is recommended is this was an item that was referenced in the 2016 State Audit Report. And in 2019, when the State Auditor provided its updated report to the City, they stated that we further recommended in our report that the City reorganize its government structure in order to better align similar functions and provide opportunities to leverage staff resources. So with the changes that the Council made with respect to the JPIA and going to the JPIA, we also have proposed some duties within finance and HR that can potentially be shared in order to really consolidate and streamline some operations. When we talk about the dual kind of purpose that HR and finance fulfills, we really believe that that would help enhance the current level of whether it's risk management, claims administration. We really believe that that consolidation will help the City in achieving some efficiencies and increase its effectiveness moving forward. And the Police Department, The proposed general fund budget includes the deletion of one vacant FTE community service officer, deleting 1.6 vacant public safety dispatchers. That is, the 0.6 that you see is made up of a part-time individual that was allocated to the police department budget, deleting 10 vacant police officer positions in the general fund, and then delete 2 vacant police officer investigators from the police department. I should note that the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget does not propose the elimination of any filled police department positions. And so what I mean is no sworn positions, non-sworn positions. There will not be any reductions in force with respect to the individuals that we have currently on board. I believe that we may have 1 or 2 officers in the academy still, and so we still have programmed them in the budget moving forward. So individuals that are currently employed by the City of Hemet in the police department, there will be no workforce reductions for that department. In the fire department, we have proposed to delete 3 vacant firefighter paramedic positions. We propose to delete 1 vacant fire captain position. This will result, in addition to those vacant positions, we have a workforce reduction of 3 engineers and a workforce reduction of 2 fire captains. And in addition to that, there are numerous materials and supplies reductions within the fire department budget that have been proposed there. The proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget proposes 4 station staffing, so engines at 4 stations, and a medic squad at Station 5, and the elimination of 5 filled positions in the department. Now again, this was all items before the council weighed in on the side letter. So with the side letter that the council approved, we will need to rework the budget and really determine what those impacts are for the budget moving forward. So this is subject to change, and this will need to be updated, and we will do everything that we can in the next couple of days to update that and make sure that we have refined numbers moving forward.
Because that will change the reduction then.
Correct, because we have, just on the immediate item here, there are a workforce reduction of 3 engineers and 2 fire captains. Based on the side letter that was approved, that will include the retirement of 1 fire captain and 1 engineer, freeing up 2 spots here. So that will reduce those workforce reductions, and we'll work out those numbers. We will work out whatever step that they are, whether they're PEPRA, whether they're non-PEPRA, and really factor in and see what that budget impact is, because those individuals have different certs, and we would need to figure out what the total cost of those other individuals are. So we need to refine that, and we'll update that at our next discussion. So proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget for the Public Works and Engineering Department. We are proposing the consolidation of the Public Works Department and the Engineering Department into one Public Works Department. So we are planning to merge those departments. We've had numerous conversations with our city engineer, our interim Public Works Director, Tim Holtz, my office, Erica, in running the numbers and really determining what the best structure is for the operation moving forward. This also results in restructuring how the operation is structured to really provide the necessary oversight from our supervisors to provide the more necessary organization that's needed for the consolidation of these 2 departments. As a result of that consolidation, we are proposing the deletion of 1 filled administrative assistant position in engineering. We are proposing to reduce professional services. We are proposing to shift the engineering development staff to City Hall to offer a better level of customer service to our development community. And we are proposing the deletion of the city engineer position. The new position would obviously be a Public Works Director / city engineer position, And I believe that may be the organization that the city had at one time. So we are proposing to go back to a structure like that.
It was like that at Hotel Mike Allen.
What?
There was one department, it was the public works, city engineer.
Right, right. I just have a question with regards to the reduction of professional services. What did that consist of?
So part of what we have is we've got some vacant positions in the principal engineer role. And so we are finalizing or getting ready to finalize the interview for that. So as a result of the savings that are made available by the vacant position, we will have the position filled by a city employee, resulting in the lack of a need for professional services to cover that specific role. So that's how we were able to generate that. In the Public Works Department, we've got numerous changes in this operation as a result of a few items that I can get into. We are proposing to shift one maintenance worker from the Parks Division. We are proposing to reduce the watering at our parks by 30%, which will have some impacts on what the parks look like moving forward. We are proposing to shift 8 employees from the division, from the Streets Division to the water function as a result of some items I can get to in a little bit. We have reduced maintenance operations by 25%. In the Facilities Division, we are proposing the deletion of 1 technician position. And again, we are restructuring the Public Works Administration to really have the staff focus in on global work versus having them central to one specific operation or division. We're really looking for some well-rounded individuals in the administrative function. The shifting of the positions from the Streets Division was necessary due to deficit spending in the streets operation. And so deficit spending over the years has depleted almost all of its funds. And so just a few years ago, Lorena and I, our finance director, talked about this, that at one point the Streets Division had a fund balance of upwards of, I believe, $2 million. And that fund balance has been whittled down to what we're projecting to receive in the upcoming year. So they've utilized all their fund balance. That's the risk of utilizing fund balance to fund ongoing operations. That if you don't make those reductions, you have to make them immediately to deal with those issues. So we are looking at consolidating the Public Works Department and the Engineering Department into one department to garner some efficiencies and increase our effectiveness in that operation. In the library, we are proposing the reduction of 1 field library assistant. We are proposing reductions in costs for the volunteer program. In addition, we have proposed reductions in maintenance and operations. At this time, we haven't proposed the reduction of library service hours, but given the reduction in FTEs, we may need to revisit that and see if it's still doable given our reduction in staffing. So it limits our ability to provide a robust level of service across the operation. So we'll be monitoring that to make sure that we're still able to achieve that. I heard Councilmember Meyer have a question about the volunteer program. There are some costs associated with the program.
I'm just making a list because I didn't think we were supposed to interrupt you, but
The materials and supplies, there are some materials and supplies costs for the volunteer program, so we've made some reductions there, unfortunately.
But there's grants for that.
Correct. And
Volunteers are cheaper than employees.
correct. Well, I'm not saying reductions to the volunteers themselves. I'm just saying reductions in the M&O side of things. Where available, Kathy has plugged in a diff that we have. Kathy could probably provide how many FTEs are there.
They were up to 8.
Good evening, Council. We have total of FTE here at 9.5 FTE at the library. We have 3 current vacant positions, part-time, so that's 1.5 FTE right there. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. How many actual full-time employees?
There are 6 actual full-time employees.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's found on page 32 of the proposed budget, if you'd like to see what those classifications are. So in community development, we have proposed the reduction of 1 field community development specialist position, the deletion of 1 code officer 2 position, which is currently vacant, and then the deletion of 1 building inspector that is currently vacant as well.
So how many code do we have right now?
We have 1 code compliance manager. We've got 3 code enforcement officer 2s that have been plugged into the budget, and that's the code staff that we have.
These are our code officers that are paid out of the general fund. What about the ones that are going to be paid out of CDBG?
So these are general fund code positions. The individuals that are charged to CDBG, we don't have a change there.
Okay, thank you.
So now we'll spend some time talking about the general fund Measure U revenues and expenditures. Again, we've clearly separated them out for the sake of the conversation. You'll also note that in the proposed budget, we included them in separate sections so that the council could see a clear delineation for them. So we anticipate $10.3 million of Measure U revenues coming into the city of Hemet this upcoming fiscal year. We will need to utilize about $684,000 of fund balance in terms of reserves in the Measure U fund to make up for the difference. So the total amount of resources are $10.9 million for fiscal year 2020-2021. You can see that this document here, which is on the lower half of the PowerPoint, includes the year-to-date expenditures and year-to-date revenues for Measure U. One of the things that I should point out, and I know Councilmember Meyer brought this up, in that the total allocation of $900,000 of fire department overtime from Measure U wasn't all the way expended, and we don't anticipate to utilize all of that. That is correct. However, we're also anticipating a significant reduction in Measure U revenues for this current fiscal year as well as for the upcoming fiscal year. We're also anticipating a significant a significant reduction in general fund revenues. And so when I talked about earlier in the slideshow about we anticipate our actual deficit for this year to be about $1 million, that's because of the reductions in revenues that we anticipate. So whatever we don't utilize for the Measure U $900,000 of overtime, that will help close that gap, whether it's on the Measure U side or the general fund side. So that's really why it was so important to try and reduce our expenditures on the front side to really chip away at that $3.9 million of reduction in revenues that we anticipate just for this fiscal year. So that's why it's so important to consider that. You can see that in the last column to the right, it projects our estimated fund balance. And again, because we haven't made any reductions currently to any Measure U employees.
Can you make that a little bigger, by chance?
So I can't, but it's in your inbox. I sent it to you in your email, so you should have a copy of that.
And it's not in the, it's separate, right?
Yeah, it was sent in a separate email because I think this was a follow-up question that one of the council members had. And so when you look at the reduction of fund balance from the beginning of fiscal year 1920, which was approximately 11.6, and you look at the ending fund balance for the projected ending fund balance for this fiscal year 1920, you can see a significant amount of reduction in that fund balance for a couple different reasons. One, the council did authorize a significant or a number of purchases from the Measure U fund balance that was adopted in the fiscal year 1920 budget. But then also, two, part of that is the reduction in Measure U revenues that we are experiencing for this fiscal year. And so since we didn't we didn't reduce our Measure U expenditures, the only way to make that up is obviously with the use of Measure U fund balance. That's why it's so important to have a healthy amount of fund balance to deal with instances like this, or else we would have had to have made immediate reductions in personnel on the very front side. So that's why you have such a big swing in fund balance. One of the reasons why you have such a big swing in fund balance. So the proposed Measure U expenditures for fiscal year 2020-2021, approximately $10.9 million. The beginning fund balance of Measure U reserves is $6.4 million. Of that $6.4 million, we are proposing to utilize about $684,000 of that to continue our operations and not further reduce our personnel and public safety. I have to say that because of the healthy fund balance in Measure U that started off at 11.6 at the beginning of this fiscal year, that's really helped the city out and not making immediate reductions to public safety. So that's been a real blessing for the city. Based on the use of $684,000 of fund balance, we project the resources available in Measure U to be about $5.7 million as of June 30th, 2020. And again, you can see the proposed amount of reserves that's been set aside as a result of the fund balance compared to the expenditures for this year at about 52%. So in your proposed budget, you will see that there is a line item that's titled Newly Funded Expenditures. This reflects a shift from previous priorities to one of maximizing the number of personnel that remain employed. So instead of having a conversation revolved around, well, I'd really like to bolster my community service officers in fiscal year 2020-2021, the conversation really was about, let's make sure that we have the personnel that's currently employed here on board and put off, at least for the immediate term, any new programs or new services or new personnel so that we don't, so that we prioritize our personnel that's here with the city right now, the boots on the ground. While we do have some vacancies in the Measure U budgets, the recommendation is to prioritize filled positions versus planning for new recruitments or new programs. It should be noted that fund balance above its reserve amount is proposed to cover numerous positions in public safety to minimize additional reductions in force. I made this statement in the staff report, but ongoing expenditures should not be programmed using one-time monies, including fund balance. But this is being done under the condition that eventual retirements, natural attrition, and a steady flow of ongoing revenue will allow those employees to be shifted back to the general fund. So as a scenario, as we are funding employees from Measure U fund balance, what needs to happen, or what will happen, is as individuals leave the agency, whether it be from the police department or the fire department, from general fund positions, we will change the funding source from being fund balance, one-time monies, to an ongoing revenue stream. So what that means is, in practice, that as an individual leaves the police department or the fire department, we are not automatically filling that position. What we're doing is we are making sure that we wean ourselves off of fund balance and really put ourselves in a position where we're able to allocate individuals to ongoing sources of revenue and not one-time revenues. We don't want to dig ourselves a hole and end up with, I know everyone uses the concept of a SAFER grant. We don't want to be in that position of having to defund or remove those individuals once that funding is gone. Ongoing, actually I just talked about that one. So I'm getting close to the end of my presentation, and so I really want to highlight one major hurdle and obstacle that I heard a few members of the public talk about, which I think needs to be reiterated and brought to the surface. The state auditor in 2016 stated that Hemet is a high-risk city due to its financial and organizational risks. Specifically, Hemet's budget deficit has persisted for many years, and our projection indicates that it will continue through at least fiscal year 1920, raising concerns about the city's ability to fund its services. Although the city developed a 5-year plan to address its deficit, inaccurate information and overly optimistic assumptions distort the validity of the city's projection. In addition, we identified inefficiencies in the city's management, and that was taken straight from the state auditor's report of 2016. In the independent auditor's report, which evaluated and audited the city's CAFR for fiscal year 2016-2017, this statement is included in page 2 of the audit letter. The general fund has suffered significant reductions in fund balance by $2,343,242 from operations. These conditions raise concerns about the financial condition of the city's governmental activities and the general fund and impact on future operations of the city. So we have two separate sources that are unrelated to one another, one being the state auditor, the other being the city's independent auditor, that are essentially saying the same thing, which raises some issues related to the city's budget and the city's finances. The $2,343,000, that's general fund balance. And so the problem is that when you dip into that fund balance, these are the types of issues that come up in your audit, because essentially you're providing for levels of service that you can't afford with ongoing revenues. So based on the statements made by the state auditor, as well as the statements made by the city's independent auditor, there is an obvious budget issue that was identified back in 2016. So the city has struggled to rectify this issue, and unless it takes serious action, it will utilize all reserves in just a few years. And that really was highlighted by the financial model that was presented on January 28, 2020. And I should remind everyone that that was pre-COVID revenue numbers. And so given the impacts on revenues as a result of COVID-19, that only speeds up that reality significantly. The same budget issues continue to plague the city, which was clearly illustrated to the mayor and city council on January 28th. As of May 26, 2020, which was just about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, the state auditor has asked for another update. And they stated to me that they have received numerous questions from members of our community, residents from our community, about what the city was doing to deal with COVID-19 revenues coming in lower than anticipated. So we'll be preparing that and providing a formal response to the state auditor. I included this narrative in the staff report, but I'll go over it again here.
Can you also provide the presentation to us?
Absolutely, yes. Again, this was included in the staff report, but it's worth reiterating. In 2016, the Hemet voters were asked to authorize a 1% additional sales tax measure to add and enhance levels of public safety services. While this was a noble concept, an effort to enhance its level of services, this tax was clearly conveyed as